Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is Donald C. Stewart and I'm here in the studio, and I will be joined remotely by an old friend of Broadcasting Scotland's Chris McCusker. Chris, great to see you tonight.
It's an absolute pleasure. It's been a while, Donald, so looking forward to hopefully doing what I think I do best.
Well, indeed, and the first time we have been on together and hopefully the first of many.
Indeed.
But we start tonight, as we always do, with news from Ukraine. And of course it is day 265 of the illegal Russian attack on Ukraine. Russia has launched waves of missile strikes across Ukraine, despite the fact that G20 leaders, including its Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, have met in Bali. Ukraine's public broadcaster has reported that the strikes have targeted Kyiv, the Kyiv region, Kharkiv city, as well as Poltava, Mykolaiv, Dnipro, Zhytomyr, Khmelnytskyi, Lviv, Cherkasy, Odessa and Chernihov, the regions over there. The strikes follow Russia's retreat from Kherson on the west bank of the Dnipro River just last week. 3 residential buildings in the capital Kyiv were hit, according to the city's mayor, Vitaly Klitschko. Worryingly, the UN Human Rights Office has said today that both Russia and Ukraine have tortured prisoners of war during the nearly 9-month conflict. They cited examples including the use of electric shocks and forced nudity. Matilda Bogner, head of the monitoring mission, told the Geneva press briefing that the vast majority of Ukrainian prisoners they interviewed, held by Russian forces, reported torture and ill treatment. There are also reports emerging that Ukrainian forces have retaken settlements on the eastern bank of Kherson after pushing Russian forces from the west bank on Friday. That included ongoing efforts to retake the Kinburn Peninsula, which sits just south of Mykolaiv and the Kherson regions in the Black Sea. Germany has also announced that they will establish a maintenance hub in Slovakia to service and repair weapons that it has delivered into Ukraine, according to the German Defence Minister, Christine Lambrecht. Meanwhile, President Zelensky has said that Russian troops have destroyed absolutely all critical infrastructure in Kherson. He was quoted as saying there is no electricity, no communication, no internet, no television. Russian occupiers destroyed absolutely all critical infrastructure for the people. And the United Nations General Assembly has called on Russia to make reparations to Ukraine and to be held accountable for its conduct. The CIA director, Bill Burns, met his Russian counterpart, Sergei Naryshkin, in Turkey on Monday to talk about, and I quote, the consequences of the use of weapons by Russia in a rare high-level meeting. A former Russian prison inmate who defected to Ukraine after being recruited by the Kremlin-linked private military group Wagner was allegedly executed with a sledgehammer by pro-Russian militias. And Chris, we every day hear more about military operations and all the rest of it. I think one of the things that was very pleasing yesterday was to see those sites of Ukrainians being liberated in their city, because at the heart of this are people, and there's a humanitarian issue that we must never forget.
Yeah, I mean, I find it incredible the fact that it's still going on. I remember commentating, I think, probably in the first week of the war, which has ensued, and I think I'm right in recollecting the fact that I said that there was not going to be a speedy resolution to this.
Sorry, just to interrupt you there, Chris. We are hearing that 2 Russian missiles have landed in Poland, which, it being a NATO country, would be a significant issue with regards to the whole conflict. And as you say, actually we're sitting here 9 months in talking about it, and I don't think we expected that this was going to go this length of time, and to find now that it seems that there's a possibility, if these reports are true, that it's extended beyond the borders of Ukraine is a further worry.
Well, It is an actual worry, and to be honest with you, I'm surprised that it's taken this long for it to actually happen. Whether it's deliberate or whether it's a malfunction with the guidance coordinates or something like that. But the fact of the matter remains is that it was, I think, possibly an inevitability that it was going to encroach into NATO controlled territories. So I mean, this we can only watch, unfortunately, and listen to any outcome that the Polish government may wish to actually escalate this, and I hope that it doesn't escalate to the point of actual sort of like NATO involvement. I think that's the last thing that anybody would wish.
It certainly is. And there have further news there, just as it's breaking, as we're hearing, it was an accidental or it's been a mistake, and that 2 people are reported to have been killed. So it's coming across the news. That's certainly very worrying. But here at home, the Scottish Government Environment Minister, Mary McCallan, has said that energy security relies on shifting from fossil fuels. Scotland has brought its experience of work to deliver a just transition in the energy sector to COP27, with the aim of supporting other countries to make the shift to renewable and cleaner, greener energy. Speaking ahead of her first full day of meetings at engagements in COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, the Environment Minister, Mary McCallan, said that an approach to energy security which focuses on sustainability, energy efficiency and renewable and low carbon energy is far better than increasing reliance on fossil fuels. During Energy Day at COP27, the Minister took part in various events to promote Scotland's hydrogen sector, held bilateral talks with other government ministers and members of the Under 2 Coalition, which is a coalition of states, regions and devolved governments which comes together to drive climate action. The Scottish Government is supporting meetings and events on decarbonisation of transport and the role of nature and biodiversity, including forestry and peatlands, in tackling the climate crisis. Scotland is also offering support to countries and organisations to address the loss and damage caused by climate change, which is becoming the central issue at COP27. Following the Government's commitment of a further £5 million of funding, Ms McCallan said, the Scottish Government is clear that the unlimited recovery of hydrocarbons is not consistent with meeting the aims of the Paris Agreement, while some, including the UK Government, seek to increase their extraction of fossil fuels amidst rising energy prices. We remain committed to a focus on policies that promote renewable energy and emerging green technologies, including the development of green hydrogen. As a country with a large existing oil and gas sector, we can bring, Scotland can, to COP27 our experience of work to deliver a just transition to net zero. A transition that puts people and communities first and harnesses the full range of opportunities that come with it. That transition is exemplified by Scotland's offshore wind industry, with ScotWind representing the world's largest commercial round for floating offshore wind, breaking new ground and putting large-scale floating wind technology on the map at gigawatt scale. Chris, we seem to be pulling our weight when it comes to this type of energy efficiency, renewables, green energy, that may be, not just because the Greens are part of the coalition, as it were, in Holyrood, but also because we have a commitment to it. And being down in the COP27 seems to have been the right idea for the Scottish Government. So are we pulling above our weight? Are we punching above our weight? Are we doing more than we need? Is it something that seems to be a very positive trajectory?
I think it's a positive trajectory. I don't think that we're punching above our weight. I think we could do a hell of a lot more. We are being held back somewhat, obviously, by the UK government. who prefer the profits of fossil fuels as opposed to the smaller profits in renewable energy. It was interesting this afternoon, not that I'm a fan, but Kenny McCusker made an important point, which I thought was very, very salient, that the off his in his constituency off the shores of Lothian, there are two offshore wind facilities. One is owned by EDF, which is cabling energy towards France, obviously. And the other one, I can't remember what the company name is, but it's actually an Irish-owned company. And none of the production of that is actually landing on Scottish shores. And that's to do with the fact that the Crown Estates own the seabeds. If we remember back in time, I'm trying to remember my history, I think they were sold off. Well, I think actually the seabeds were sold off by the Labour government back in the 90s, for offshore oil exploration. It is correct to point out the fact that the Crown has total charge over who it can sell to, and obviously these sites have been sold to the highest bidder. And it's also cutting out the knock-on effect. Actually, is cutting out on manufacturing in Scotland. Because the turbines and the wind propellers are not even manufactured on Scottish soil, such as Bifab and the other yards. But they're actually manufactured. One of them is actually manufactured in Hull. Which I don't think if Hull can get work out of it, that's fine. But what we're finding now is the fact that, and it's often argued that in a just transition, everybody needs to be carried along with it. So it's not just the users, but it's also the manufacturers. And Scottish manufacturing, to build these turbines and stuff like that would sustain an awful lot of green jobs in these smaller yards, such as Bifab. Whilst the bigger yards, could carry on with sustainable shipbuilding and all the rest of it. So I think it was a really, I think it was a really good point to make. And again, Scotland not being in charge of its energy policies and energy procurement, it's something that it needs to change in order for Scotland to benefit from that just transition from fossil fuel to renewable energy.
It's interesting, Chris, that the difference between the sort of UK government and the Scottish government is something that is increasingly seen to be quite divergent rather than convergent. So rather than working together, there seems to be two very different points of view. And worryingly or embarrassingly for the British government today, the United Nations Human Rights Council has called on the UK to act over poverty, housing and equal rights. The UK must tackle rising poverty, the UN Human Rights Council has said in a report that includes demands from less well-off countries for the British government to act. Amid worsening financial prospects for millions, the member states of the UN body also demanded action on housing to prevent homelessness, better food security for young children and equal rights for people with disabilities. After a 4-yearly review, the UN body issued 302 recommendations in a written document on Monday. The report came as new figures showed that 4 million children in households on universal credit face big cuts in income if benefits are not increased in line with inflation in Thursday's autumn budget, and that the proportion of consumers who cannot afford to eat a healthy, balanced diet rose to 36% last month. Dozens of organisations in the UK, from Oxfam to the healthcare trade union Unison, said the United Kingdom was failing to meet its international legal obligations. More than 80 groups have written to the Ministry of Justice, urging it to heed the UN body's demands and scrap plans to replace the Human Rights Act with a Bill of Rights, which has been dubbed a rights removal bill by critics. Chris, I said embarrassingly, and I mentioned, the difference between the UK government's approach and the Scottish government's approach. Is any government's approach going to be able to deal with what is in essence a very real economic crisis for children and young people and families within our borders?
Well, the Scottish Government are actually trying to redress that, and we have evidence of that. With the and I'm quoting the several UN rapporteurs, is the fact that the game-changing introduction of the £25 a week payment to mitigate child poverty by the Scottish Government, which is not replicated on any other level within the UK, is, in inverted commas, a game changer. £100 a month to help children who are going to school, and some families are struggling to maintain the level of school uniforms, footwear. I mean, I don't know. It's been a long time since I was at school, but even providing the money for a play piece or something like that, in these challenging times, the Scottish Government have stepped up where possible within our competence, which we are allowed to do, and yet the Scottish Government never get the recognition that it's due for actually implementing this, excellent payment, and countless times we see the Tories and the Labour, even the Lib Dems, carping from the sidelines, asking the Scottish Government to do more, and out with the fact that we don't have any of the borrowing powers, which would allow us to do more. Then it actually shows the vast inequality within the actual UK framework, and it further enhances the fact that the UK government are not stepping up to the plate, and the Tory party are by far the party of the ordinary working family.
All right. You mentioned there a game changer, and perhaps one of the game changers that could come in this week is the Chancellor being suggested that he could bring in a 40% windfall tax on electricity generators. Jeremy Hunt is reported to be preparing to hit electricity generation companies with a 40% windfall tax on their, quote, excess returns, as he attempts to fund measures to ease the cost of living crisis. The Chancellor is considering a levy on the extra profits made by generators above a certain price per megawatt hour, which is yet to be decided. He is also planning, apparently, to toughen the existing windfall tax on North Sea oil and gas operators, raising the tax from 25% to 35% and extending it by 2 years until 2028. The two windfall taxes are expected to generate £45 billion over 6 years, depending on movements in energy prices, according to the Financial Times. The North Sea windfall tax had been forecast to raise around £28 billion over 4 years. The move to curb the profits on electricity generators represents a departure from the former Prime Minister Liz Truss's plan to cap the revenues of renewable and nuclear power producers from next year in line with the EU's revenue cap. Meanwhile, in the Scottish Parliament today, in the modern-day equivalent of the Macron report, opposition MSPs downplayed Scotland's renewable energy potential as they accused the Scottish Government of misleading Parliament over Scotland's renewable energy potential. Chris, you kind of alluded that there in terms of not getting the credit for what they're doing. There are people capping on the sidelines. Is it a game changer, the windfall tax, or is it just simply going to fill in a hole that Trussonomics provided for us? Rishi Sunak has been refusing to say he condemns what Liz Truss did, but he must have an entry that's filled with all the problems that she created for him.
Well, yeah, you know what I mean. I find it astonishing the fact that she was ever elected in the first place, but that's, you know, neither here nor there. They do say that 1 week is actually a long time in UK politics, and it proved too long for Liz Truss because the lettuce actually won the popularity stakes. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to fill a hole which is roughly required about 55 billion, which the UK government have to find, and you know, the way to do that is obviously a great way to do it would be to actually, you know, do what they propose to do, which is to tax the oil giants. What we've heard this week is the fact that even the small, shall we say, lip service approach. You know, what they said earlier is that they are, you know, applying such a tax at this moment in time. We find that Shell are still not paying anything. You know, so I mean, this needs to go a lot deeper. You know, even to fill that black hole of 55 billion, you know, the percentages, you know, in tax revenue would need to be a lot greater. You know, if the fact that their current proposals at the moment is to raise that 55 billion, would only see the country break even. They need to go deeper than that. They need to, you know, think outside the box, because it's not just oil and fossil fuel companies. You know, we need to start thinking about the other companies, you know, which have made vast profits, especially through the pandemic. The online companies such as your Amazons and stuff like that, and all the rest of it, although there are other providers, I must point out. But these companies have made huge, humongous profits because of people's inability to, you know, go around their daily business, and it was a captive audience. They must pay back something. And also what the UK government has to do, it has to redress the amount of wasted money on the track and trace system for a starter. Then you've got the wasted money on the PPE contracts. You know, I think I seen a figure cited 35 billion of PPE procurement had to be burned. It had to be incinerated because it was absolutely useless. That's 35 billion that the UK government are never going to get back. You know, so you know, I'm honestly, I'm looking towards Thursday with some real trepidation, because as nuanced as the approach of Jeremy Hunt in his new position, I think it's an absolute Rubik cube to try and you know, dig the UK economy out of the hole in the one fell swoop, the way that they, you know, are saying that they're going to do. There is going to be eye-watering consequences from that. So, you know, we can only just look towards Thursday with a bit of trepidation.
Indeed, and prior to that, the SNP have said that the United Kingdom government incompetence is what is hitting families in the pocket. They've said that families are paying an increasingly high price for the UK government's incompetence as real wages have fallen by 2.7%. Brexit and the UK government's economic mismanagement have contributed to the fastest rise in the cost of living for 40 years, with the Bank of England warning unemployment could double by 2025. The Glasgow Central MP Alison Thewlis said independence is the only way for Scotland to escape long-term economic decline under Westminster's control. The SNP's Shadow Chancellor said families in Scotland are paying an increasingly high price for Tory incompetence as real wages fall and the cost of living soars. Neither the Tories nor Labour can be trusted to fix a crisis that they have created by imposing Brexit, the biggest and most devastating long-term cause of the United Kingdom's economic decline. The UK budget must deliver a boost to incomes, energy bill support for low and middle income families, a real living wage and extra investment in the NHS to help people weather the storm. Chris, that just chimes exactly with what you've just said. It's a worrying picture, perhaps made more worrying by somebody who doesn't seem perhaps to have that Rubik's Cube puzzle where he needs it to be in order to provide the real support that's needed for real families in real crisis.
Yeah, you know, and we only have to look at the amount of food banks there are today compared to, you know, even 10 years ago. The Trussell Trust being one of the foremost food banks. I don't know if that's a great label to actually tie around your company, but you know, I mean, 5 years ago, we made the point that there are more food banks than there are McDonald's food courts in the UK. And I think McDonald's at that time had in excess of something in the region of 1,700. And you know, possibly more. And it's absolutely appalling the fact that they are needed today. You know, I mean, I have always avoided, you know, talking about politics and football when I'm on this show, but you know, I have to point out that you know, both of them are intrinsically, you know, entwined, because there's so many football clubs in Scotland at this moment in time who are working with the communities, you know, and providing food bank, you know, supplies, and you know, helping their local food banks fundraise, you know, which is helping immensely. You know, I mean, I seen it on the ground. I was running my own refugee hub, and we had a kind of like de facto food bank there, and we were not refusing anybody who came through the door and said, you know, is there any chance I could have this or I could have that? Okay, they were Ukrainian refugees. They were you know, the some of the asylum seekers, you know, which are in the hotels at this moment in time, you know, from various countries. But at the end of the day, they still needed food. What I'm trying to point out is the fact that if you go back 20, 30 years, you wouldn't have found a food bank within Britain. And yet, you know, today it's an everyday word which, you know, now appears in the English dictionary.
Absolutely. And slightly helpful, or indeed perhaps on a more positive note, the labour market statistics have come out from July to September 2022. And Scotland's estimated employment rate fell slightly over the quarter to 75.3%. Scotland's estimated unemployment rate, however, rose over the quarter to 3.5%, and the estimated inactivity rate fell to 21.9% over the same period. The employment rate for women aged 16 to 64 in Scotland was the highest since the Labour Survey series began in 1992, being 75.2%. Separate HMRC early estimates show 2.43 million payrolled employees in Scotland in October 2022, 49,000 more than in February 2020, which was prior to the pandemic. Commenting, the Scottish Government Employment Minister Richard Lochhead said, "The Scottish labour market continues to show resilience in the face of ongoing challenges to the economy, with marginal changes over the quarter to the employment, unemployment and inactivity rates. Additionally, the employment rate for women in Scotland was the highest since the Labour Force Survey series began in 92. I said slightly more positive because there is a degree of resilience in amongst that. But it is perhaps a false dawn. Perhaps there is something going to come once the cuts that are being announced, like the Royal Mail cuts and so other jobs going, that's going to be a figure that's going to be really under threat over the next couple of months.
Well, yeah, and I hate to throw the common denominator into the mix here, but it's inward migration that's sadly lacking, in the UK as a whole, but particularly Scotland. Scotland has always relied on inward migration, and this is going to be an issue going forward for the Scottish Government. As they try to intertwine the care sector into the Scottish National Health Service as well. That care sector needs people to actually work in it, and that sector itself has hemorrhaged so much labour, which was coming from European countries, and now obviously because of the loss of freedom of movement, they are sadly struggling to keep that service at the levels that was once enjoyed pre-Brexit, shall we say. But it's not just that sector as well. As an ex-trade unionist who used to work in aviation at Glasgow Airport, the aviation industry was absolutely hammered by the decisions taken at top level by airlines and airports, throughout the UK during the COVID pandemic. Where it paid off an exorbitant amount of staff, and those staff didn't return. We're now seeing levels coming back in flights and passenger numbers. They are now slowly coming back to where they used to be pre-COVID. But the staff aren't there because the staff now realise the fact that they can get the same wages in, a supermarket or, some other sector, without having to do the weird and bizarre shifts that that are needed in the aviation industry. Starting at 2 o'clock in the morning and stuff like that, in order, to send your average family off to their jollies in sunny Torremolinos. So those sectors, again, need inward investment, in the actual workforce. And because the Scottish Government are not, in charge of immigration, then, they're severely going to be hampered.
Absolutely. Sunny Torremolinos, you're taking me back. Thankfully, it never hit the headlines. And in further pressure today, Scottish Government has called for the retained EU law bill to be withdrawn completely. Constitutional Secretary Angus Robertson has once again urged the UK Government to withdraw the retained EU law revocation and reform bill in its entirety. Mr Robertson said that should the UK Government press ahead with the bill, the legislation should be amended to mitigate the most severe impacts of it and to prevent divergence from the high standards and protections previously provided by European Union law. The Scottish Government has today published a list of amendments which include removing the proposed sunsetting of over 2,400 pieces of law and taking away the proposed power of UK ministers to act in areas of devolved policy without the consent of Scottish ministers. Details of the proposed amendments have been outlined in a letter from Constitution Secretary Angus Robertson to Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Secretary Grant Shapps. This follows the lodging of a legislative consent memorandum recommending the Scottish Parliament withholds consent for the bill. The retained EU Law Revocation and Reform Bill seeks to revoke over 2,400 pieces of legislation that were included in the UK statute book at the end of the Brexit transition period in being able to accord with EU law. Scottish ministers have repeatedly highlighted their concerns that the bill puts standards at risk, including regulations protecting rights for pregnant women at work, environmental standards and requirements to label food for allergens. Chris, this comes up quite frequently. There's this move to take our borders back, I think was the phrase that was used, which was supposed to highlight a lot of things that were going to become back under our control. And here is something that is very, very worrying. It could not just take away a lot of the standards and controls, but things over people's rights.
Well, yeah, and those standards and controls that you mentioned there, Donald, have actually been slightly eroded by the trade agreement with Australia and New Zealand. They don't have the same standards in food production, food manufacturing as the UK once enjoyed with the EU. Again, this is, cascading to the lowest common denominator, which was on the Brexit agenda, was to lower standards, so that we could equally trade with, the likes of Australia, New Zealand, and even America. And that's actually turned out to be, a complete fallacy, because thankfully, Biden has actually, more than once stated the fact that there will be no trade agreement between the UK and America, such as his fierce defence of the Northern Islands, Belfast Agreement. Until that's fixed, I don't see the UK government being able to fix anything else. I think that has to be fixed first, before they can even begin to, take away these accords that, as you pointed out, I like the use of that word, the accord, because that is very important with the agreement, the loose agreement, shall I say, between Scotland and the EU, is the fact that, when we were in the EU, we fitted the full acquis of the EU requirements, and we still do. If this bill goes through, then sadly we will not, and it would possibly make it a slightly more difficult proposition for Scotland to actually rejoin the EU if this is actually to be enacted.
Indeed, and in news that may cheer some up, across in America, it has been reported after the midterm elections, where the red tsunami turned into a hardly noticeable draft for the lobby. Rupert Murdoch has reportedly warned Donald Trump his media empire will not back any attempt for him to return to the White House, as former supporters turn to the youthful Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. After the Republican Party's disappointing performance in the US midterm elections, in particular the poor showing by candidates backed by Trump, Murdoch's right-wing media empire appears to be seeking a clean break from the former president's damaged reputation and perceived waning political power. Last week, Murdoch's influential media empire, including right-leaning Fox News, his flagship paper, the Wall Street Journal, and the New York Post, each rounded on Trump, calling him a loser and a flop responsible for dragging the Republicans into one political fiasco after another. A new poll from conservative group Club for Growth, once a Trump ally, showed Trump polling behind Florida's Republican Governor Ron DeSantis by double digits in hypothetical runs in Iowa and New Hampshire. In an interview with ABC News released on Monday, Trump's former Vice President Mike Pence said that the US would have better choices in the future than Trump. Pence said that he and his family are taking prayerful consideration of whether he should run himself in 2024. Trump is facing more bad news as the special US House committee investigating the January 6th Capitol attack is considering whether to issue him a contempt of Congress referral after the ex-president skipped a closed-door deposition with the panel that was scheduled for Monday. The committee's Democratic chair, Benny Thompson, said that the contempt of Congress referral targeting Trump could be an option, though the Mississippi congressman added that the panel would have to first address a lawsuit filed against it by Trump's lawyers on Friday. The suit challenged the subpoena ordering Trump to appear at the deposition as a violation of executive privilege. You know, Donald Trump, my namesake, has been a soap opera for such a long time. If it weren't so serious, it might actually make it at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe. Are the rats finally deciding that this is the ship that they cannot be on anymore? But should we always keep an eye out for where they turn up next?
Again, I love that analogy. Absolutely brilliant. Because you know, honestly, I wouldn't trust Murdoch as far as I could throw him, and that was me, you know, choosing my words politely there. You know, Murdoch is a populist, and he is only concerned with selling papers and selling news. You know, it's like that. You know, I often view it like that James Bond film. I can't remember the title, but the arch villain was a newspaper mogul who was creating the news in order to sell the headlines. You know, and he was creating chaos and mayhem across the Western world and stuff like that. And you know, James Bond goes in and takes him down and whatnot, and what have you. If you know of that film, then you will have the cut of Murdoch's jib. You know, Trump was always, I think, you know, going to return, and I think again I'll hark back to one of the wonderful episodes that I've done in the past. You know, and commentating on Trump's woeful enactment of you know, various policies. The biggest of all was the failure to actually build the inhumane wall between the USA and the whole fallout of that immigration policy that he tried to enact. You know, just fell at his feet, and actually announced to the world what a complete and utter racist that Trump actually is. And I believe actually that has been cited. I think it was, if you just bear with me a wee second, that was actually on the New York Post.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, they have him sitting there like Humpty Dumpty, you know, and not being able to build that wall. So you know, I mean, Trump coming back into politics, you know, was about as credible as Boris Johnson coming back into politics. You know, I mean, as we've seen, I don't actually think that Boris Johnson has been in the chamber as an actual backbench MP since his ousting. You know, because you know, he has been on holiday, bless his wee cotton socks, for the last 5 weeks.
Indeed he has, and interestingly enough, when the policy that he was trying to enact, Trump, with regards to Mexicans, there was a famous Mexican actress on a BBC show who talked of when the Mexicans heard of his policy. She went to a children's party and they had a piñata, which was of Trump. And she said, not a child get close to it. Or the Mexicans just lined up. And, you know, that artistic response brings me to news that caught our eye today from Germany, where young Germans are to be offered €200 culture passes on their 18th birthday. They are to join other Europeans in being offered a voucher to spend on their choice of cultural offerings under a scheme launched by the government. The €200 Culture Pass, which will be made available to all 18-year-olds, has twin aims: to encourage young adults to experience live culture and drop stay-at-home pandemic habits, and give a financial boost to the art scene, which has yet to recover from repeated lockdowns. Germany's Culture Minister, Claudia Roth, described the cultural passport as the equivalent of a birthday present for the 750,000 people who will turn 18 in 2023. It will bring the European Union's most populous country in line with France, Italy and Spain, which have introduced similar schemes. The Finance Minister, Christian Lindner, described the pass as cultural startup capital that its recipients can use within a 2-year period for everything from theatre and concert tickets to books or music. It will be managed via an app and website that provides a direct connection to a virtual marketplace of everything from bookshops to theatres. The estimated cost to the German state is about €100 million, in addition to the country's annual €2.3 billion cultural budget. Particular emphasis is being put on live culture, with theatres and concert venues expected to use the scheme to recruit new audience members as they compete for the revenue. Good habits, Chris. And one of the things that we have in Scotland, of course, is the National Entitlement Card, which means if you're under 18 in Scotland, you get free bus travel, which is hopefully also a boost to a number of other elements within the economy. This seems like a damn good scheme.
This is an excellent scheme, and it's worth noting that similar to the system that was implemented in Italy, it was worth to the tune of €500. As you pointed out, it's a similar system in France, Spain, and it just shows how progressive these countries are, to try and involve the younger generation into the cultural aspects of art and music. And I mean, it's not something that you would be able to spend on a pair of Nike trainers or anything like that. We're talking about things that would actually stimulate the mind, and it's only right that you mentioned the fact that Scotland's got its own unique system as well. I think that could be greatly extended, to encompass more cultural establishments within Scotland, which could be more accessible, using that card. I think it would be a radical, step for the Scottish Government to actually implement, and think again outside the box, and say, right, okay, we can't actually do what other countries such as France, Germany, and Italy and Spain have done, but we can do this. And again, lead the way, and in some shape or form actually show up the UK government for their lack of involvement in schemes such as this.
Absolutely. And of course, innovation is not something we are unused to see in terms of medicine. And news today that an innovative cytosponge procedure speeds up the cancer diagnosis. An innovative new procedure which speeds up that diagnosis has now benefited more than 5,000 patients. The cytosponge diagnostic service, introduced during the pandemic, means patients can access cancer checks closer to home, helping to reduce the strain on health services. Using cytosponge means that patients can get scope results by simply swallowing a small pill with a thread attached, rather than using traditional scope methods and sedation. After swallowing the pill, it expands into a tiny sponge which is pulled back up the esophagus, collecting cells on the way, which are then examined for abnormalities. Cytosponge helps to identify important conditions such as Barrett's esophagus, which is a known risk factor for esophageal cancer. The procedure, which is supported by NHS Golden Jubilee Centre for Sustainable Delivery, has now been used over 5,000 times up to the 3rd of November 2022 across Scotland. Just as I was reading that, Chris, I did rediscover my gag reflex. It's not something that I necessarily would see myself being part of, but I have to say that again, this is something that's very innovative, something that's very, very good. And then I'm reading this week about people who are talking about the NHS potentially underfunded and being on its knees. One has to worry whilst scientists and those working in the NHS are doing fantastic work. What do they need in order to keep doing
it? Well, I mean, where do I start? I mean, obviously yourself, Donald, you've been, again, facetiously reading the Tory tabloids, the likes of the Daily Mail and the Daily Express, in order to come out, with that negative attitude towards the wonderful Scottish National Health Service. I mean, I honestly, I deplore. I'm absolutely dismayed at how both the unionist parties in Scotland run down our NHS. Speaking as a carer and someone who deals with the NHS on a weekly basis, sometimes a daily basis as well, depending on the performance levels of my older brother. I mean, I read and recoil at some of the horror stories, which undoubtedly do happen. But in equal measure, the stuff that the Scottish NHS has done. Even in my lifetime, even in my family, the amount that the Scottish Government has done has been absolutely fantastic. So, anything, again, forward advancements even from penicillin and all the rest of it, the small increments that go into R&D within the Scottish NHS have got to be lauded. And, the unionist Tories and Labour can constantly play it down, but the people that really know, the people that benefit from the Scottish NHS really know and really value exactly the extent of what our NHS workers do for us.
Absolutely. And the First Minister today has thanked NHS workers as she received her winter vaccinations. She received her COVID-19 and flu vaccines at Glasgow Central Mosque Vaccination Centre. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon took the opportunity to thank everyone contributing to making this year's winter vaccination programme a success. More than 2.7 million winter vaccines have been delivered since the 2022 programme got underway. The COVID-19 vaccine has been given at the same time as the flu jab where possible, with 92.8% of those getting a COVID vaccine also getting their flu vaccine. The 50 to 64-year-old cohort is currently being invited to book an appointment following the rapid vaccination of frontline healthcare staff and the country's most vulnerable over 65s and those at high risk and care home residents. Anyone who's missed an appointment can reschedule through the NHS Inform online booking portal. Speaking after receiving her JAGs, the First Minister said, "Part of the reason we have been able to get back to much more normality is because of vaccination and the protection it gives us. But COVID hasn't gone away. It's still at risk and it's still circulating in the community. So vaccination is as important now as it was at the start of the programme. Chris, I have had mine over the last week. I have to say that I wasn't given a choice. It was a case of here's your appointment, come and get it. And I was delighted because I work in care and, the opportunity to go and be part of that many people, that army of people who are going to help protect others, I think was very important for me. And I accept others might not see or believe in that manner. But for me, I think it's been one of the successes to see people coming together in order to look after others. But here, the vaccination programme has been a success.
Yeah, you know, I mean, undoubtedly it has been, and you know, I'm not going to sit here and take away anything either from the UK government or the Scottish government and the rollout of the vaccination. I think it's been excellent. You know, I think Scotland has stepped up to the plate and delivered the vaccination centres all across the nation. You know, I myself was due to get my fourth jab last week. Unfortunately, I couldn't take it up because I had a bout of COVID, you know, you're supposed to lay off for 4 weeks after you recover. So, you know, I'm soon to be nipping off to my offshore tax haven in Lanzarote next week. Once I get back, then I'll be able to take up that offer of the fourth vaccine. You know, I mean, it's rolled out, you know, not only to that group as well, but you know, I need to point out to viewers that it's also rolled out to unpaid carers, you know, such as myself. You know, people who are, I consider myself to be a frontline essential for my elder brother. If I wasn't, you know, looking after him and advocating on his behalf, then you know, he wouldn't be able to access, you know, half of the things that he's able to access. You know, so I mean, again, earlier on we were talking about the Scottish Government integrating the care sector into the NHS. You know, I would appeal to any Scottish Government ministers that are watching this, be mindful and take into account the amount of work that unpaid carers do, you know, in helping the Scottish Government and the Scottish NHS.
Well, Chris, on that note, can I thank you for tonight? It's been an absolute delight to have you, and it's the first time in a long time that I've had a long conversation that brought up both Torremolinos and penicillin in the same set of conversations. So fantastic to have you. Thank you very much for being with us.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's really great to get back into the saddle. Thank you.
Great. So before I go, I just want to remind you that here at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. So to everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, this is a daily thank you very much. And it's heartfelt and well meant. Our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford as little as £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. We have set ourselves a target of adding 10,000 new subscribers, which would enable us to employ staff to make more programmes and send me on a crash course on how to pronounce Ukrainian place names. But from me, Donald C. Stewart, for tonight, it's good night. Thank you for watching.